watching. My name's Sienna. As you can tell by the name of this video, I'm going to be talking about my recent experience with a heterotopic pregnancy. So if you don't know what that is, I know I certainly had never heard of it before it happened to me. It is basically an ectopic pregnancy, which is a baby growing in the wrong spot and a baby growing in the right spot simultaneously. So it's twins but growing in separate areas of the reproductive system. I found out I was pregnant at about 5 weeks into the pregnancy, just from the usual symptoms: a missed period, sore boobs, things like that. It was definitely a shock to myself and my partner. We weren't planning the pregnancy, but anyway, we just rolled with it. The day after we found out I was pregnant, we moved towns. So we moved an hour and a half away, not because we found out I was pregnant. It had already been planned, but it just happened to fall on that same weekend. So we moved an hour and a half away to a place called Emerald. We were living in a little mining town called Middlemount, but yeah, moved to Emerald, a bit of a bigger town. It's actually a hospital, thank God. So moved there. The day after is when my morning sickness started. So really bad morning sickness. Most days I couldn't even get out of bed. Still to this day I still have morning sickness, but nothing as bad as what it was at this stage. Yeah, got so bad that by about the 8 or 9 week mark I couldn't even stomach water. I was barely eating anything just because I was so sick of vomiting it up that I just decided not to eat. And it was a Tuesday when I thought I needed to go to the toilet. And obviously when you're not eating and drinking water, your body's dehydrated, nothing's really moving around in your stomach. So anyway, I sat down on the toilet and immediately I just got this really intense pain in my, just below my chest. So like my abdomen area. It was really excruciating, almost like a really tight pulling pain. And because I hadn't been able to eat or drink, I just immediately thought it was constipation. So I eventually got myself out of the toilet, and I think I just went and sat in the shower for like 15 minutes just in the fetal position, just trying anything to take the pain away. Didn't work, but it's all I could think of doing at that time. I could barely even move, but I knew if it was just constipation it would just pass, so I just went with it. After I got out of the shower, I think I laid in bed. I got my partner Lockie to make me a cup of tea, and then I just went to bed basically in the pain that I was in. Woke up on the Wednesday. I was still in a bit of pain. It wasn't quite as intense as it was on that Tuesday afternoon, but it was still pretty bad. But I still put it down to just constipation. Still hadn't gone to the toilet, so I went to the shops and got some pear juice and a whole heap of fruit, just to try and get things moving. I didn't get any laxatives because I wasn't sure if they were safe to take while you're pregnant. I'm so glad now that I didn't end up buying any or taking any, because I found out later with the condition that I had that it could have actually been really dangerous to have taken them. So thank God I just went with my gut instinct, and always just go with your gut, I think. Anyway, I did that throughout the Wednesday. Was just drinking nothing but pear juice and eating nothing but fruit, but I got things moving, but it didn't ease the pain at all. So I just figured it was, it was here to stay for a little bit, so I just kept taking it. Woke up on the Thursday and the pain was even worse. And I was just sitting in the bath, and all of a sudden I just had like a light bulb moment. This was in the afternoon, but I'm a bit surprised that I didn't think of it beforehand. But for whatever reason, it just hit me at this moment that I thought, like, well, am I maybe having a miscarriage? I hadn't had any bleeding, which I think reassured me a little bit, but I did also know that it wasn't, you know, when you have a miscarriage, you don't always bleed. So I called Lockie and told him what I was thinking, and he said, yeah, you know, like, you should go to the doctors and see what's going on. So I did that, went to the doctor that afternoon. He had a feel of where it was sore. So by this stage, it had moved from the center of my stomach down to the right side of like my lower abdomen, which is kind of the symptoms that you get when you have appendicitis or a burst appendix. It starts in the middle and then travels lower to that one side. So he actually brought in 2 other doctors from the surgery to get their opinion. They weren't entirely sure either, so they just decided to send me for a blood test and an ultrasound that afternoon. So by then it was like 4 p.m, so everything was starting to close, but I managed to make it to get my blood test and ultrasound straight away, which was really good. In the ultrasound, the first thing the lady said when she started, you know, looking around was that she could see the baby's heartbeat, which was really reassuring. It gave both Lockie and I a bit of a sigh of relief, because that was obviously our main concern. But she still continued to have a look around for about a further, what felt like forever, but I think it was like maybe 10 or 15 minutes. She was just having a look around. She wasn't saying much, but by the end of it, she told Lockie and I that she could see something a bit strange that was on my ovaries, and she wasn't sure what it was, but she would obviously send the images off and I would get the report and the results back the next day, because it was so late in the afternoon. So I get ready to go to the doctor the next day, and it was quite an indescribable feeling of what I felt that morning. Like, it was like, okay, this could potentially be the day that I find out I'm dying. Like, that's just the thing that was running through my head. Obviously it was just the worst scenarios just kept playing in my mind, like I had an ovarian cyst or a tumor or something, just the worst things that I was thinking of, as you do when you're in that situation. But anyway, I went back to my doctor and he still hadn't received the results from the ultrasound. So by this was on the Friday, and I was in more pain than ever. So he was pretty concerned. I think just the fact that I was pregnant and that I was in this much pain. So he pretty much said, look, like, I want you to go to the hospital straight away. So I did that. I drove myself up to the hospital, did my triage, sat in the emergency room, waiting room for like an hour or so. Still at this stage had quite bad morning sickness. So on top of the pain, I was vomiting every 10 to 15 minutes. Which wasn't helping at all, but finally got me into my little like consultation room in the emergency department, and a doctor came and saw me and went through everything with me. He didn't really seem too concerned at the time. He had seen the results from my ultrasound the day before and put what they had seen on my ovaries, that it was just a cyst. It was nothing dangerous, nothing to be concerned about at all. Most women have them. So it ruled out anything of that, which was a bit, it was relieving, but I still wasn't sure what the pain was from. So he got me to go for another blood test and ultrasound inside the hospital, and a few hours later the results came back from that, and they still weren't 100% sure what was wrong with me. Because neither of the tests had pointed anything out or ruled anything out. But they did, for whatever reason, put it down to a appendicitis, and that they actually thought there could have been an abscess on my appendix as well. But there were certain elements of the test that was saying that wasn't what was wrong with me, like my blood count wasn't out, which said that my body wasn't trying to fight an infection, which would have been extremely rare for if I did have appendicitis, and that's what my body would have been doing. but they still put it down to that. They couldn't think of it, anything else that it could have been. So they organised to fly me to Rockhampton Hospital through the Royal Flying Doctor Service. So Rockhampton's about a 3-hour drive away from Emerald, even though by the time everything got moving with the plane, it probably would have been quicker to drive to Rockhampton. But in saying that, the bumps from the being in a car would have been excruciating, so probably a good thing that they got me in the plane. Yeah, by the time they told me everything that was going on, it was about lunchtime. I think Lockie had finished work and he had come and seen me in the hospital, and then when he found out, he went home and packed bags for us, and he, a couple of hours later, started the drive to Rockhampton because he wasn't able to come in the plane with me. So he did that. I ended up getting to Rockhampton Hospital, I think it was about 8 or 9 p.m. I'm not too sure, like after everything with being on the plane and then waiting at the airport and then having to go through the emergency department with all my details and stuff like that. Yeah, it was about maybe 9 by the time I got to my emergency department room. A surgeon and a gynecologist pretty much came in straight away and saw me and discussed what the go was. They said that they were going to get me in for surgery straight away that night, which was a bit of a shock because I wasn't expecting to go on until the next day. But I'm so grateful now that they got me in that night, because if the surgery had been delayed any longer, like I don't know what would have been the outcome. So yeah, very, very grateful that they were able to get me in so soon. It was a little bit daunting. I'd never had surgery before, never been under anaesthetic. My grandmother actually, many years ago, she passed away from not the procedure itself, but she passed away following complications and sickness after an appendicitis surgery. So that was pretty scary. But I knew, you know, the odds of that happening to me as well were pretty unlikely, but still made it pretty scary. So they prepped me, like they started getting everything ready for surgery, and I needed to go and do a wee. So I said, is that okay? And they said, yeah, that's cool. So as I was walking to the toilet, sorry, this part's a bit gross, but it's part of the story. So as I was walking to the toilet, I felt like liquid, like dripping down my legs. And I just, like, I thought to myself, like, what the hell, have I just weed myself? Like, I didn't really understand it because it just was so random. But when I got to the toilet, I actually looked down and noticed that I had experienced quite a lot of bleeding down there. So that was a bit concerning. And when I got back to my room, I told the gyno, and she didn't seem too concerned. She said she's not sure if that will be something to do with the pain that I'm in or what I'm going through, but they'll get me in for surgery anyway, and they'll have a look and see what's going on. So they did that, and obviously I don't remember too much of the surgery. I remember saying goodbye to Lockie, and then the rest after that is obviously a bit of a blur. I remember going to the theatre and then dozing off. Next thing I remember is I waking up after the surgery, and when the nurses woke me up, all I remember is sitting up straight away because I was just in such a panic because I'd never experienced that type of feeling before from waking up from anaesthetic. So I was obviously laying down, and then yeah, when I woke up I sat straight up, and I think I gave the nurses a bit of a fright. They were like, oh my god, like, relax, just lay back down, you've just come out of a really major surgery. And I was in extreme pain, like more pain than what I was prior to going in for surgery with the abdominal pain. It was a different type of pain, but yeah, really excruciating. And I remember thinking like, oh, you know, appendix surgery, I didn't think that was too big of a deal, or I definitely didn't think it would be classed as a major surgery. And I don't know if she was the surgeon or the gynecologist, but she proceeded to tell me that when they went in with the keyhole surgery to look at my appendix, they found that it was fine. But they also found a lot of internal bleeding, and they eventually found that my right fallopian tube had ruptured. So yeah, they put it down to obviously that I had an ectopic pregnancy. They knew that my other baby was still there, so that is when it's called a heterotopic pregnancy. So unfortunately they had no choice but to remove that right fallopian tube. The rupturing had caused me to lose about 750 ml of blood, which is quite a lot. So it was quite a big emergency. They actually had to do an incision on my lower abdomen. It's about that big. Very similar to a C-section scar. So yeah, they told me afterwards that when you conceive naturally, so that's how I fell pregnant, naturally, no IVF or anything like that, that the chances of this happening is like a 1 in 30,000 chance, which is pretty crazy. But if you knew me as a kid and my health history, you'd know, yeah, you'd just think, yeah, of course this would happen to me. My health history isn't that great. But yeah, so that happened. They told me that so this happened on the Friday, and then I didn't get discharged until the Tuesday. So I spent a few days in hospital, and those few days were just horrible. Like, and I know ladies get C-sections every day, but I've just never heard of the pain and the recovery following a C-section being this bad. Like, I don't know if it's because it wasn't actually a C-section, if they, you know, the other procedures that they had to do internally in me made the pain worse, but that pain was just, I wouldn't wish that pain upon anyone. Yeah, anyway, so the Tuesday we were able to leave, so we had to drive for 3 hours back to Rockhampton, and then the weeks following that was still very painful. So I think I was bedridden for about 1.5 to 2 weeks, and then up to about the 3 weeks I was still had no appetite. I was still in pain, but it was slowly easing every day, getting better. Mind you, on top of all of this, I still had terrible morning sickness, so vomiting every day, and obviously where that incision is where, you know, when you vomit, that's a lot of where the movement happens. So it was quite a horrible experience, but it's all over now. I'm about 18 weeks pregnant now. I've read that the survival rate of your other baby, so the baby that's growing normally, is about 65% with a heterotopic pregnancy, which in my eyes that's pretty good odds. I think I'm like almost fully out of the woods now. The scariest part was obviously straight out of surgery, and the trauma that would have caused the baby then. But I had an ultrasound like a week after surgery and everything was all good. Still now everything's great. I still have morning sickness, but still nothing compared to what it was before. That's another thing, is one of the warning signs from this could have been my severe morning sickness, because obviously if you have a multiple pregnancy and you're so early on as I was, you wouldn't have had an ultrasound usually, and you wouldn't have known that it was multiple pregnancies. But multiple pregnancies means more hormones, which usually increases the severity of morning sickness. So that's not to say that if you have morning sickness this is going to happen to you, because it happens to so many, like most pregnancies. But if you're having really bad morning sickness, like that you can barely even function, can't even keep water down, it could mean that, you know, there is something wrong, or you just have multiple pregnancies. Yeah, you don't know. But yeah, all good now. I'll quickly show you my scars. So I've got the little ones on each side here. That's from the keyhole, and one on my belly button, and then the big one here. Very similar to a C-section scar. But yeah, it's all good now. And the reason I made this video was because I know when I came straight out of this experience, I would have known, like I would have loved to have been able to come on the internet and find something like this, so I could just have someone to relate to. Because there really is not much on the internet about heterotopic pregnancies, and I just wanted to make this for anyone in the future who experiences it and can watch this video, or otherwise for someone who watches it now and experiences similar symptoms in the future, they might, you know to act on it quicker than what I did. So yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'm very open to answering anything, or talking about, anything that happened during the experience that I didn't cover in this video. But other than that, yeah, I'll leave it at that, and thank you so much for watching and have a great day. Bye!